Hello, everyone. This is Nick Cavalancia again with ScriptLogic. Thanks for attending today to our Surefire Ways to Manage Your Desktops More Efficiently webinar. Just a couple of bit of housekeeping before we get started. You will notice that there is a questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to go ahead and populate your questions throughout the webinar. Would prefer that you provide some context. If you happen to put a question at the beginning of the webinar, but we're going to get to them actually towards the end of it, and that way we know what you're talking about. Sometimes we get questions from people that just say, why does it do that? And we have no idea what you're talking about. So in order to make sure that we can answer the questions as efficiently as possible, if you provide a little context, maybe what we're talking about and during the webinar when you're asking, that sort of thing, that'd be great. And then we'll answer questions here on the phone at the end of the webinar. We're also going to be giving away a couple of $30 Amazon gift cards at the end, so be sure to stick around. I'll tell you how to do that. And then I guess we'll just kind of jump into this and move forward. So let me tell you a little bit about ScriptLogic just real briefly. We've been around since 2000. We focus on 4 key areas of Windows management: the desktops, help desk, server, and Active Directory. Servers, by the way, include Windows, SharePoint, SQL, and Exchange. I always like to say that we have management tools for that which is consistent throughout every enterprise. Everyone's got Active Directory, everybody's got desktops, everyone's got Exchange or SharePoint or SQL or some combination therein, and so on. And our goal with all of our products is to centralize, automate, and simplify what you all do on a daily basis. So rather than, in some cases, organizations will, or I should say ISVs will take a look at a particular technology and try and build a solution around what the technology can accomplish. Instead, what our solutions do is we actually start with what you guys are doing on a daily basis and figure out, how do I automate that? How do I make that simpler so they can get more done with less, so to speak? We do have well over 30,000 customers worldwide. They do everywhere from the SMB, and the very, very small side of the SMB could be even 10 customers, or 10 seats, excuse me. All the way up to the Fortune 100. I think our largest customer to date is 110,000 seats worldwide. We are headquartered in what is normally sunny Boca Raton, Florida, and if you've been following the news, you know that the hurricane Irene is just passing right by us about 200 miles to the east of me currently. And we just got a little bit of feeder bands and that kind of thing. So if you're on the East Coast, I hope you guys are doing all right. And we're still hoping that Irene takes a sharper right turn and just leaves us all alone, because that's I've been through that. No one wants to do that. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Quest Software. We were acquired in 2007. We do continue to create, sell, support our own software, but being a subsidiary of Quest basically makes us a part of the single largest Microsoft ISV in the world. Let me tell you a little bit about who's speaking today. Obviously, I'm going to be doing a little bit of talking. I'm also joined by my esteemed colleague, Michael Osterman. Michael, why don't you go ahead and say hello?
Well, Nick, thank you very much, and thank you for everyone who's here today. Looking forward to providing some useful content.
Okay, so Michael's principal with Osterman Research, and so Osterman focuses on a lot of primary research with decision makers and influencers. Michael, actually, why don't I won't do it justice, so you know your own pitch, so why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about what Osterman does best?
Okay, very good. As Nick mentioned, we do a lot of primary research. We're very focused on the messaging, web, and collaboration industries. And really, we look at any type of electronic communication in the workplace, so archiving, security, encryption, and so forth. And desktop management is a key part of that because, so much of the influence on messaging and collaboration and the way people work really is influenced by their desktop experience. That's where people spend most of their day. And so we spend a lot of time really talking to IT managers and others that are focused on helping facilitate that and making that an easier experience in their organizations. We were founded in 2001, celebrated our 10th anniversary back in April, and we're based near what is unusually sunny Seattle. So we're sort of swapped. It's usually sunny Florida and cloudy Seattle. Just have a bit of a swap today.
I'm jealous. So let's jump into it, Michael. Why don't you get us started?
Okay, sounds great. Well, basically, let's start with a discussion of the cloud. We hear a lot about the cloud, that a lot of organizations are migrating there and so forth. And when you talk to people, when you talk to IT managers or business decision makers or others that are really, seriously considering moving to the cloud, one of the primary reasons they want to do that is to eliminate the burden on IT. Now, obviously, it's a separate discussion, but IT is somewhat fearful that their burden will be alleviated so much that they'll be redundant and that they won't be needed anymore. That is not really the case in the vast majority of organizations, but really the goal of the cloud is to move a lot of management of applications and servers and all kinds of stuff out to somebody else into some remote data center so that you won't have to do it yourself and you'll be alleviated really from the burden of having to do that internally. Bottom line is that if you could eliminate the desktop and eliminate all of the tasks around that, you really would make IT's life easier in a lot of situations. But the problem is, and there's a however here, and a very big however, there are a lot of important reasons to stay with the desktop infrastructure. Performance is really one of the primary ones. Now, there are some very good cloud applications that are very speedy and that allow people to do work quickly. But if you're dealing with a lot of processor-intensive tasks, a lot of things that really require a lot of horsepower, usually a desktop experience is better because you don't have reliance on internet connections, network latency, and so forth. And so for a lot of applications, you want to remain on the desktop. Also, one of the primary advantages is that users can keep working when the network is unavailable. As people on the East Coast may be experiencing, even if they're not in the direct path of the hurricane, their internet connection may get knocked out for a period. Ours yesterday, in perfect weather near Seattle, was our internet for several hours was at an absolute crawl between 0.4 and 0.6 megabits per second. Really hard to get things done if you're dealing with a cloud-based application. The desktop obviously is superior because you're not as dependent upon external factors. Also, employees don't need to be retrained. If they can keep their desktop experience intact, they don't have to learn a new interface on the cloud and so forth. And also, even in a cloud-based environment, IT still has to manage a lot of desktop issues in things like malware protection, USB security, virtual desktop interfaces, OS patches, just a lot of things that still have to be managed at the desktop, even if you migrate a lot of stuff to the cloud. Another important caveat that's not mentioned here is regulatory issues. Some organizations have very strict regulatory issues, and so they can't necessarily use a cloud-based application to store customer data simply because they don't know exactly where that data is going to be stored, and there could be some jurisdictional issues there as well. Not a really common issue, but it is for some organizations. So what really will benefit IT? I mean, what is the primary thing that IT really needs to do? Well, you need to keep the desktop infrastructure in place because it does make life easier, as just noted, because you don't have to keep users, or you don't have to migrate users to a new paradigm. You don't have to have a lot of help desk calls as users are trying to figure out what to do and so forth. But what IT really needs is a way to really reduce the time and effort required to configure and patch and protect and really maintain the entire desktop infrastructure. So obviously you want the benefits of the cloud to reduce IT's burden, but you also want something that is going to allow the desktop infrastructure to stay in place so that you can derive benefits from that as well. So what can IT really use? Well, there are really 7 things we'll identify here. First is a way to do most of their work remotely. If IT doesn't have to dispatch a technician out to a desktop, particularly in a really geographically distributed organization, life is a lot easier. You want to be able to diagnose and remediate problems. You want to be able to maintain compliance with all of your corporate configuration standards for servers or whatever they may happen to be. It is, obviously the desktop has to be configured appropriately. You want to look for unauthorized software installs. We did a survey some time back, and we asked IT, how confident are you that your employees aren't installing things on the desktop that they shouldn't be? And that was we've had a fairly low level of confidence there. So people are installing just a wide variety of Twitter clients or various other types of applications that they really shouldn't be doing. And you want to be able to look for that remotely if at all possible. And really, bottom line here is that you want to do all of your work remotely without having to dispatch a technician. Anytime you have to send somebody out to a desktop, it's going to be an expensive proposition. It's going to take a lot longer than it needs to if you can do things remotely and so forth. Second thing is you want, let's see, I think we need to go to the next slide here. A way to manage software licenses. Really, you want to be able to manage all of your software licensing in order to maintain compliance with all of your licensing agreements. And that can be a critical issue because organizations can run afoul of licensing agreements and in some cases pay significant fines if an audit, a regulatory authority comes through and there's some sort of an audit required. So you want to maintain software licensing as closely as possible. Bottom line here is that if you don't do it right, if you do have licensing that's out of whack, it can be very expensive if you happen to get caught. And in an era where we have a lot of layoffs and a lot of disgruntled employees, the number of cases like that, have gone up simply because you've got more people that are acting as whistleblowers, whether they should or not. They are. Next thing you need is really a way to patch computers quickly. Desktop computers need to be patched really as soon as possible to maximize platform and network security. Most of us are on Windows platforms, and you know that there are patches that come out all the time. Patch Tuesday, but sometimes more frequently than that. You want to be able to patch things as quickly as possible for the OS, but also for all of the other applications on the desktop. If you don't, you run afoul of security protocols, and you really are at more risk. Bottom line here is that if you do have out-of-date security software in particular, but really any type of software, particularly for the OS, you can have some fairly serious ramifications and things you probably don't want to go through. Next thing is that you need a way to configure desktops easily. You need to manage registry settings, printer settings, and really all sorts of applications and network resource settings and so forth. And if you can do that remotely, if you can do that with some sort of a management package that will allow you to have insight into what is, how each desktop is configured, life is a lot easier for IT. Next thing you need is a way to manage peripheral access. USB ports, for example, are a major source of data leaks in organizations, and in most cases it's really just inadvertent data leaks. It's employees taking home data so that they can work on it, word processing documents, spreadsheets, and so forth. As IT and as business managers, you need a way to manage that access. You need a way to manage the compliance risk, the potential risk of data loss, and really all of the other problems that surround that. And in a few isolated cases, you'll have employees that steal data maliciously. There have been some cases where that has occurred. And so you want to be able to manage peripheral access to the greatest extent possible. Also, you want to be able to manage how data comes into the organization through USB ports and other ports, for example, because you can have a malware problem that exists if you do allow data to come in through on a USB stick and you're not managing that properly. So bottom line here is that USB ports and every other port for that matter really have to be managed. You have to manage peripherals well. Next thing is you need a way to manage desktops of any type. Windows, Macs, desktops running in terminal server mode or virtual desktop mode and so forth. So you need to be able to manage everything in your infrastructure. And what you find in most organizations today is that you do have a mixed infrastructure. You may have settled on Windows as the primary desktop platform, but you have a lot of users that are employing MacBooks, in some cases Linux-based machines and so forth. So you need to manage all of your desktops across the entire organization. And then the last thing is really a way to search across all of your desktop computers remotely. Admins really need to be able to search remotely across every desktop computer. I think we need to go to the next slide here. Oh, okay. I guess that was missing. But basically, you need to be able to search across all of your desktops remotely. And reasons for that include e-discovery, regulatory compliance, searching for content that could increase an organization's risk, and so forth. So bottom line here, in summary, is that you need to keep the desktop infrastructure in place. There are a lot of advantages in doing that. And yes, desktop management using conventional status quo methods is really a pain, but there are a lot of advantages to keeping that desktop infrastructure in place. But IT needs a way to manage desktops more efficiently, to be able to manage things remotely instead of sending a technician, to really have insight as to what's going on in the entire desktop infrastructure. And so IT needs to focus on managing desktops as remotely as possible and as efficiently as possible, really to drive down costs and minimize the risk to the organization overall. Okay, that concludes my part of it. Nick, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, Michael, it's interesting. The reducing cost obviously fits really nicely in with the state of the economy, both from if we can automate things and we can keep users from having to travel, that obviously doesn't just lower the total cost of ownership. Everyone always talks about that, total cost of ownership and ROI, but truthfully, from an IT standpoint, it then logically would help them from not having to have more headcount or increase the the travel costs and things like that. Just seems like kind of a win-win for IT, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very definitely. And also consider just the efficiency, that if you can manage desktops remotely instead of rolling the technician, if you're on a big campus even, where everybody's at least in one general physical location, it's going to take you, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes maybe to get out to that remote location and the same amount of time to get back. And if you can do that remotely, you can handle so many more tasks per day. And so it's not just a cost reduction issue, but it's the speed of resolving problems, it's the speed of making sure that everything is up to snuff and so forth. So just, from even not a cost perspective, just an efficiency issue, it makes a lot of sense to do it as remotely as possible.
Yeah, so what I want to do for the rest of the slide presentation, for those of you listening, was talk about sort of traditional desktop management, how people normally do it, which I kind of consider a very reactive methodology, and then talk about a more proactive methodology, taking what Michael said about all the use of automation and remote management. And by remote doesn't necessarily mean you're remotely taking control of the desktop. It could just mean you're remotely configuring, let's say I want a piece of software to deploy out on my desktops or something. But doing that in a real proactive manner so that the efficiency isn't gained in just doing it remotely. And although we would save the 15-minute walk across the campus, but even taking that a step further, what if we actually set it up so that the user always had the environment they needed to work within in the first place so that the technician didn't have to go out and do anything? So you see a couple of bullets I've got up here for traditional desktop management. I like to use the term cramming the OS. And the concept is, and most of you will probably nod your head, you've done this at least once in your career. If not, you know someone that is doing it. And the idea is Windows 7's come out, as the example, roll back a year or two back. Windows 7's out, what are we going to do? We're going to upgrade people. Now let's go ahead, let's re-image. All right, so we're going to build a master image. And what we're going to do on that image is we're going to cram everything into it. We're going to put Office on there and Adobe Reader and the HR app and the whatever other apps that need to be on there and all the different patches and so on. And that tends to be a way that IT works because it seems to be the one methodology that they can grasp and get accomplished. The problem with doing that methodology is it only meets the organization's needs one time, and that's at the time you made the image. Let me tell you what I mean. So let's say you re-imaged in 2007 was the last time you did it. Just go with the example. Now you'll see why. I'm going to use Office as an example here. And when you did it, you put Office 2007 in that image. And let's say you haven't redone the image since then, just for the sake of conversation. So if I was to roll out a new desktop today, what version of Office is on there? Office 2007. Does that meet the organization's needs today? No, there's brand new versions of Office that have come out subsequently, and we need that version to be on, the latest and greatest of Office to be on there. Right? Now multiply that example, tenfold, 100-fold, based on patches. When the OS was first imaged, let's say last year, a year before, whatever it is, you put all the most up-to-date patches. It was patched then. It isn't patched today. Same thing with, let's say, Adobe Reader as my other example. You put version 8 on a couple years back, and we're up to, I don't even know what we're up to now, 11, 12, or whatever it is. It's much higher than that. And the idea is that we're not meeting the organization's needs moving forward when we cram the operating system. And the end result is that it just actually increases the support management costs of that desktop because now someone has to go and make sure that machine is up to date. And a lot of times it gets done on a one-off basis. So, and the other problem with this, as I've got here, one size doesn't fit all. The concept behind that is that you can't really cram the OS that meets everyone's needs. Unless you were going to go and build an OS that had the basics that everyone needs, like Office and Adobe and so on, but then you installed the accounting app and the HR app and the sales app and the marketing app and whatever else is in there and put them all in one operating system, and then I guess if you did that, when you would deploy it, you would delete off the apps you didn't want them to have, sort of. I mean, it doesn't really even make sense to even go down that path, but you can see how ludicrous that is. And so you can't really make an operating system that's crammed with everything that meets everyone's needs. So either you have to do it with the let's put everything on there, or really that's not the right methodology. So let me give you a more proactive methodology of doing this. This is going to give you what I like to coin as a secure, consistent, and functional desktop for each user. Think about those terms before you continue reading on. It's a secure desktop with this methodology I'm going to talk about. That means that the user has the right patches that are up to date, they're protected against malware, and so on. It's consistent, and it's consistent in two ways. One is that the user, no matter where they sit down in the organization, if someone moves from desk to desk, office to office, city to city, they have the same desktop. They have the same configuration everywhere they go, consistent, so they can get their job done. But it's also, I'm going to use the term consistent in sort of an inconsistent way, and I'm saying that with a smile on my face. So what I mean is there are some inconsistencies that need to be done in order to keep the user functional, which is that last identifier there. And that is if a user moves from, let's say, one building to another, or one city, one office to another. If I want to, let's say, be able to print, and I was in the LA office yesterday and I'm in the Dallas office today, right, then I need to have a different printer configured today than I did yesterday. But even though it's not the same printer, it kind of goes back to the idea of consistency in that I need a printer. I need a printer that's local. That needs to be consistent. So there are a couple of inconsistent consistencies, so to speak, where there are aspects of the desktop that need to change based on the user's current needs. And so going back to that concept of cramming the operating system, you can never meet those needs if they're constantly changing. A really good example would be if some of you are in a school district, some of you, our customers are, and some of you on this phone probably are as well in this webinar. And if you're in a school district, let's say K through 12, you have students that are moving from room to room every hour. And in let's say, in their first class, period 1, they are in room 101, so they need access to the room 101 printer, right? They need to be denied access to the internet. They need access to the math application. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, but you follow me, right? But when they go to second period, right, they're going to be, let's say, in, creative writing or something. So they need to now have access to the printer in room 102 and have it be made the default. They need to have access to the internet so they can go to dictionary.com and Wikipedia and whatever else, right? And they have some writing app that is installed and up and running, that kind of thing. It's a totally different set of needs. So I need this secure environment. I need it consistent within the context of I need to get my job done, and there's certain things that I need in general, like a printer-to-printer that is next to me, but also some very specific consistent things like access to my home drive. And then I need things that make it functional, and that's taking those inconsistencies and those consistencies together and making this desktop that then, if you look at the bullets below, lowers the need and the cost to support the issues. I don't have to, the need to support the issues lowers because the user always has what they need to be functional and productive. So the cost always goes down. That means that proactively, if I can push this stuff out, I won't need to walk across the campus, which means I may not need to have to spend the time fixing a problem either, because it's going to be proactively handled. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that a little later on. Reducing the need for re-imaging. Michael just briefly touched on the second bullet, was imaging your desktops. And that kind of goes back to my concept of cramming the operating system. Instead of most people saying, well, just re-image it. It's all screwed up now. Just re-image the desktop. Instead, it wouldn't be screwed up if you were proactively managing the desktop with a proper desktop management platform. Also, you'd be able to know what's on your clients, because you're not allowing them just to put whatever they want on it. You've created a secure environment. That also means you're protecting them from themselves, right? That's the part of the security. And you're knowing what's on that desktop, on that virtual desktop, whether it's physical, virtual, or published. But you'll also know what's on there because you've limited their ability to install their own stuff. So that way, I've condoned it as IT that they're allowed to have Office and Adobe and all the other apps they need and so on to get their job done, but that's it. And so that gets you to a point where you can allow what you want and deny what you don't want to be on the desktop. So the concept here, kind of going back one slide, with traditional desktop management, you're trying to, in some way, kind of fortune tell the future, and put everything on an operating system. One time when you built it, when Windows 7 first came out, as the example was early on, That doesn't meet the needs today. That met the needs 2 years ago. But instead, what I suggest to you is make an operating system that is vanilla. It has the base operating system with the base configuration you need to be productive in your environment. It probably means you wouldn't have Office on there or any other apps. You might have it patched up to the point where the operating system was first created way back when. And you leave everything else up to a desktop management platform to push out. The end result is you start with this vanilla OS plus a desktop configuration that's deployed that meets today's needs. Today we need the current version of Office, the current version of Adobe Reader, the current printer that the user is based on the location they're at today, and so on. And that meets their needs today, and it's up to date. That lowers your support costs. So let me tell you a little bit about Desktop Authority, and I've only got, I think, one more slide. I'm going to do a demonstration because I don't want to death by PowerPoint you guys here. This has both user-based and computer-based management, and it combines a number of different technologies that you would normally think would be separate. So desktop management, which would be things like, let's say, application deployment, maybe patching, hardware and software inventory, reporting, that kind of thing, with the functionality of what you would normally associate with login scripts, with the functionality you normally would associate with group policies, with that of anti-malware, with device lockdown, with power management, putting all of that into one platform so that rather than having to require you to have multiple solutions, each with their own management console, and having different people managing different aspects of the desktop, you have this all centrally managed, all under one roof, so that you're deploying the whole desktop. The idea is that if you look at the list down here of all the things you normally do with these different technologies, if I had them under one roof, I could create, let's say, an accounting profile for all the people in accounting, and I will create the security settings that are appropriate for accounting, the power management settings that are appropriate for accounting. A good example would be maybe end of month when they're closing the books. You don't want your machines to shut down if you have power management implemented at your business. But not in accounting, don't shut theirs down because they're working after hours, late into the wee hours of the morning, and whatever. So let's not do that. Configuring the aspects of the desktop that's normally done by, let's say, group policies and login scripts, protecting them against anti-malware, deploying the apps they need, the patches they need, whatever it is, and deploying that whole desktop just for accounting with one platform. And then multiply that example, 10, 100 times, whatever it is, based on the different configurations you may need, all the while doing this on top of that vanilla operating system. So I hope you're starting to see the benefit now. You can say, I got this vanilla OS, just a base, and then you're putting the sprinkles on if you need it, the chocolate sauce if you need it, and the nuts and the caramel and bananas and whatever else you want to add to it. And you're adding the things just needed on a per user, per computer, per department, per business unit, whatever you want basis in one platform. So that's Desktop Authority. There's 4 key areas I want to kind of focus on here. The desktop configuration, desktop management, security, and then support. So let me do this by jumping over and showing you. Let me show you here. I'm going to jump over here and share out. Come on. Share out. Here we go. My IE session. So you guys should see Desktop Authority here. It runs web-based. Again, this is one single platform that does all of this management. A number of agents are deployed out onto the desktop. This, by the way, only supports Windows desktop. So while Michael did mention Macs as an example, some of you might have some Mac clients. This still only supports Windows desktops. This does support whether they're physical, virtual, or published, meaning they're in a Zen server or terminal server environment. Supports all of that. But let me start by talking about desktop configuration. That was the first thing. So typically desktop configuration would mean configuring the user's desktop and the user's environment. So we have 2 aspects of this, computer and user-based management that I talked about a little earlier. So let me first go ahead and expand the configuration management that we have in Desktop Authority. And the first thing that I want you to do is I want you just to kind of look down the list with me. And most of these elements that you'll see here are somewhat self-explanatory. If you look, for example, at drive mappings, you're going to go, that's probably where I'd set up a couple of drive mappings. Yeah, you're right. Oh my gosh, imagine that. And down from there, file operations like copies, moves, deletes, folder and registry permissions. A little farther down is actually registry entries, printers, their Office and Outlook settings, and so on. The idea is to give you the ability in a graphical interface. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the simplest of all these, and that's a drive mapping, where I'm able to go ahead and create part of the user's environment. Oh, hold on a second here. I got to share out my desktop here. I think it just went ahead and stop sharing. So I'm going to share the whole desktop, and then that way you guys can see everything. When it opens up another window, it doesn't do that. So here we go. Sorry about that. So now I got my whole desktop shared out. So this is the details of that this drive mapping. You see it's nothing more than just simply picking a drive letter that's here, and then the UNC path that you want to provide, and a couple of other options that you're able to select, and you've created your drive mapping. It's that simple. So the idea here is to create an environment where I very quickly can configure the different aspects of the desktop. Let me go ahead and pick another one. Let's take something like, let's take actually registry settings as another example. If I want to go ahead and make a change to a registry entry, I'm going to go ahead and edit one of those. And you'll see here I can write a value. You'll pick your hive in the registry. Oops, sorry, press that twice. And then put in the key, the path that it's going down to, the data type, the value, and the expression. And it's that simple. We're making it very quick. That's what we like to call point, click, done. You'll see on the slide deck, when I bring that back up, we always have, I think it's in the lower right hand, it says Windows Management, point, click, done. And that point, click, done isn't just a marketing mantra, or a slogan. It's actually the way that we try and build our products, where we try and make it very easy. Point, click, and you're finished, so that you're not spending a lot of time performing these different tasks. Now, by the way, I should note that I'm showing you Desktop Authority version 9. That's going to be coming out in just a couple of weeks. It's in a release candidate state right now. This is web-based, and the current version has a thick 32-bit client instead. So I'm just showing you the latest and greatest here. Let me show you one other example here real quick of the desktop configuration. Things like drive mappings, registry settings, those would be kind of login script-esque, if you will. But there's also things like our group policy template functionality, where we allow you to take your ADM files. Let me go ahead and add an entry in here. ADM and ADMX files, and push the settings out through Desktop Authority. And let me go ahead and just really quickly add one of these in. See, one of the challenges of the group policies, of course, you can push settings out, but you're going to have to do that in such a way where you have to create either an OU structure that allows you to start creating the subcategories of users or subsets of users that you have in your environment. I'm just going to pick the first couple of the ones that are here and import, and actually over here to settings, and I should have this set in here. And you're going to either create an OU structure, or you'd have to utilize the 6 levels of granularity that come with group policies by default, which is domain, computer name, group affiliation, username, Active Directory site, and I'm missing one, but you guys probably know the rest of them. And the idea here is that instead I can push these out here with, I'm going to go ahead and just pick whatever setting comes up here. Which setting here isn't really the issue here, but I'm trying to go ahead and create one of these, edit one of these values here for you, so you can see that I'm pushing out an actual group policy change here. And I can go ahead and configure it and so on, right? I'm going to enable this value, and then allow me to directly go to the components wizard, as the case might be. But the benefit here is that we aren't locked in to utilizing just those 6 levels of granularity in the group policies. We have our own targeting engine called validation logic that I want to show you. I'm going to show you that in just a second. The other benefit, of course, is just having a one-stop shop, so using one solution. You saw in that previous slide, we had desktop management, group policies, and login scripts, and anti-malware, and you had all this list of, I think it was 7 or 8 different things. So some of your desktop management strategy actually includes all of those as separate products. We're trying to do this into one platform. So let me go ahead and cancel out of this change, because the setting itself isn't important to me. But what I want to show you here is the targeting engine that we have with Desktop Authority. Now, I've only shown you a couple of these different elements because I don't have time to show you all of them, and most of them are kind of self-explanatory here. And if you want to see any one of them, by the way, just note to me in the questions box for the end, hey, could you show me this setting? I'd really like to see what you can do there. I'd be happy to show it to you, but just for right now, I'm going to keep moving. But what I'm going to show you here is the targeting engine that we use with Desktop Authority, and it's important to know that the targeting engine can be used both for, in this case, I'm going to show you a drive mapping entry, but it also can be used for anything that's on the left-hand side that I'm going to show you both now and throughout the rest of the demonstration of the product here. And the point of validation logic is to help you target who's going to get what configuration. It can be done here at a per, like in this case, drive mapping basis. The idea here is the accounting needs one drive mapping to the accounting data, but let's say HR needs a totally different drive mapping to the HR data. It's different for different people, so we allow you the ability to target that. But it also can be done in a much higher sense of If I want to create, we have what are called profiles. Think of them as folders in a folder structure, or like OUs in Active Directory. And you create these profiles, and you can create validation logic at that level to say, let me do all of these different configuration aspects for the New York office. And you set some validation targeting there to say if you're in the New York office or not. And see, the challenge for you guys isn't doing, let's say, the drive mapping, is it? Right? You're like, Nick, it's a net use statement, man. Come on, that's not that tough. I can do that. A registry entry. You can use regini from a command prompt. Of course, you can use PowerShell these days. So I'm just trying to even go old school, how easy it was, and it has been for years, to be able to go ahead and push out those kind of settings. Even office settings, it's a reg change here and there, that kind of thing. Printers could be a net use statement, and so on. That's not the challenge for you guys. The challenge is being able to target and hone down who of the tens, hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands in some cases, should get a particular set of configuration settings. I always like to use the example of in the people in the payroll department, they need the P drive mapped to the payroll data. They need the payroll printer installed. They need the payroll app installed. Maybe the people in a certain office need some registry tweak made so they can connect to a specific application server where the data exists for payroll there. The people in a different office, maybe in another continent, maybe there's a set of North American payroll people, and then there's some people in Europe or Asia that use a different data set or whatever it is. Maybe they need a different application server setting, and so on. So you need some ability to target. So we start here by, if you look at the list here, start by the class of machine. We differentiate based off of the class being if it's a desktop, a portable, if it's tablet, embedded Windows, terminal server, member server, domain controller. Should note, by the way, that terminal server also includes Zen servers for those of you running Citrix environments. Operating system, everything from XP to Windows 7, and then Server 2003 through 2008 R2. The connection type there, LAN and dial-up, is basically backward compatibility for older versions of our software. Timing is there for log-on, log-off, and refresh, because some things are appropriate at log-on. Like, let's say, having the drive mapping done would be better at log-on than any other time, so that way when the user sees their desktop, they have their start button and all their icons and whatever, they have their working environment. It's already there. They're ready to be productive. So log-on is good for some things. Log-off is good for other things. Maybe you're going to do a patch. You want to patch a machine. It's not critical. It's got to get patched, and it's a really big download. It's 250 megs or something, and it's going to take a while. Well, do you want the user sitting there twiddling their thumbs when they first log on? Of course not. So let's do that at log-off. Let's make sure that particular execution happens at log-off, and then that way users will be able to be productive, and then when they log off to go home and they're driving home, that's when the patch is being installed. And then refresh is there to keep reinforcing settings, and I'll give you an example of that a little later on. The next one is virtualization. If you're in a non-virtual machine, physical desktop. If you're running VMware, Microsoft-based virtualization, or Zen server, you have those, and we can differentiate between those. And then, of course, if it's a 32 or 64-bit platform. Now, you see on the left-hand side, I have like terminal server client. Then over on the virtualization, I have virtual desktop environments as well. It's important to note that we support all of these, and we differentiate amongst them. That way, if from let's say maybe a security standpoint, if someone's on a physical desktop, they're in the office. You're going to let them access this app and that data set and so on. But if they're on a virtual desktop in any of the platforms, doesn't matter which one, they're at home, connected in remotely, so therefore you're not going to give them that software and not give them access to that data set and whatever it is. And so being able to differentiate between the two is really important. Now we go far deeper than this. Really quickly here, we have a set of validation logic rules. Let me go ahead and add these in. Hopefully I'll be able to show you all of these. The list, I'm going to have to scroll down through this list a little bit, so let me do it this way. Let me go ahead and expand this out like this. And I'm going to have to scroll through this to show it to you. And I'm going to go through these really quickly because I'm more trying to give you a general sense of what we can do with validation logic than go through each one specifically. But you see that you can use the domain of the user or computer. You see what group the computer's in, and then down a little bit below that, user, organizational unit location, what Active Directory site they're in, the username, the computer name. If I scroll down a little more, things like host address, MAC address, IP ranges, IP address, if a specific file exists and what version it is, registry values. Terminal server, this also applies again to Citrix environments as well. So if you're inside terminal services, what the app name is, the client name, and so on. There's some custom validation we do as well, and then timing and events here. We do frequency, which would be like every Monday or the third Wednesday of the month, that kind of thing. And time ranges, time of day or day of week kind of thing. And the custom validation, kind of coming back to that real quick, would be anything that we don't currently do. We do support some scripting language with some variables in order to create some custom functions of your own if you need to. So if there's something we don't do in validation logic, you can build it yourself. And then the last thing here is that if I kind of cancel out of this, you'll note here that there's these if statements here that I've got, and if I add one or more, you'll see these or and in the upper right-hand corner here. I can add Boolean operators and or statements to become exponentially more granular. In essence, I have something like 40 to the nth power levels of granularity with validation logic. And I say to the nth power because I can use an example like, let's only deploy out this piece of software if you're in this group and on this subnet and in this Active Directory site and running this particular operating system and. So very quickly, even if you had tens of thousands of users, you could very quickly narrow down to the 50, the 25, the 10, the 5 to 1 that need that particular configuration. So let me move on to the next thing, which is desktop management. And again, everything else I'm showing you in here, a validation logic applies to. So let's look at things like, let's say, maybe software management, which would be something that can be done on a per-user basis or even a per-computer basis. If I look at things like, let's say, an MSI package, if I want to deploy out an MSI package with desktop authority, let me show you how fast it is. I press the Add button. It's going to bring up a listing of MSI packages that are in our repository once I hit Select. So Select, I think I have one in my little demo environment here. It's the Microsoft C++ distributable. Just go with the example. It could represent Office. It doesn't matter. And I can hit Save, and I'm done. That's it. It took me like literally about 7 seconds. Once the configuration refreshes on the desktop, it'll go ahead and deploy out to everyone by default. And of course, you'll notice there's a validation logic tab here where I can set the validation logic for this particular setting and how it's going to be deployed, both for the standard rules and the validation logic rules if I want. So it's that fast. And it should be that easy for you. It shouldn't be a huge task just to deploy out software. There's, of course, a number of other options that are here, like do I want to install or do I want to remove it, and also if I want to use a transform file to modify the MSI slightly for a particular installation. Other things that normally get associated with desktop management would be things like, let's say, patching. So we support both Microsoft and select third-party patching that's in here. I'll go ahead and add in. You'll see it first. It's going to bring up a box that lets me filter out what I want to patch. I can do it by queue number, by criteria, by individual patch. I'm just going to go ahead and hit search here. It'll show me a result instead of a bunch of patches. But we support things like Adobe, a Real Player, WinZip. I can't even think of all the different third-party patching that's already out there. But you'll see here, here's even Skype that I have. You see some Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. The idea is that you could pick the ones that you want and then deploy just those out. A couple of options like, do I want to deploy from a specific server, or I use Active Directory sites to find the most local server to me if I'm the client doing the patching. Also support service pack deployment separate if you really want to do that as a separate thing from patching. Patching, by the way, is an optional component with desktop authority, so you have to purchase that separate from the product as an option, but service packs do come built in because it's nothing more than selecting a service pack type and an executable path, and then automatically when that particular OS doesn't have that service pack, it'll deploy it out, and so on. And then let's go to security management next and talk about desktop security real briefly. Actually, before I do that, just real quick back on desktop management. Going over to the computer-based management, a couple things that you'll notice is I have patch and service pack again, because sometimes things are appropriate to be patched based on the computer, right? Even software, you see up there, software management is up here as well. And some things are good on a per-computer basis. I might want to deploy Office to the entire desktop, right? But I might want to put a patch out to the entire machine. But some things are done on a per-user basis, like maybe that specific user on a particular desktop needs a patch to an application. So we have both. There's also the ability, where am I missing it? Is it, no, I don't want to go to anti-malware yet. Here it is. On configuration management, I have the ability to also do wake on LAN deployment, so that way I can wake a machine up, go ahead and do the patching, of course, and shut it back down afterwards if I want. We have a rather unique wake on LAN implementation where every single client that runs our agent that can be woken up can also be used as a beacon. So it will forward out our request for a machine to wake up. So if any one machine on the subnet is up and running, it's a desktop authority client, it can be used as a beacon to wake any other machine up. So you don't have to have dedicated machine sets. It's kind of a cool, unique feature. So let's go down to security management. Going back over the user configuration here, because I think it's got a little more here for me to show you. There's, of course, things like security policies. The most important thing here is probably the user account control that I have. So if I hit Add over here, I'll have a user account control tab that'll pop up here in just a second. Here it is. I'm going to stick over there. The settings tab, just real briefly since I'm not going to cover it, it's backward compatibility for older versions of our product where we used to have security settings there. But you'll see here I have the ability to go ahead and enable user account control for Windows Vista and Windows 7 and later. And then once I've done that, I can specify UAC settings. That's one thing that I can do. Again, note the validation logic there still applies. It applies to everything and throughout all of Desktop Authority. Next thing I'll show you is USB and port security. And the USB and port security we have, we call it both. It's not just USB lockdown. Like with Windows 7 by default, with group policy, you can lock down a couple different types of devices, but it's kind of an all or nothing for USB sticks. Either it's all of them or nothing. So instead here, what you'll see here is if I go and let me go ahead and add a setting here. Let me just come on up. They're waiting. Hurry up. They're watching. Speed it up. It might be my VM that I've got running here in the background. Here we go. So if I scroll down here, go on, scroll down with me. Sorry about this, folks. I think I pressed too many buttons at the same time. I have a little hourglass there running next to it. But I'll start with what you see on the screen. You see that it's not just USB sticks. You see FireWire and Bluetooth and floppy disks and so on. All this is done for you. Here we go. There we go. So now let me bring all of them up and refresh this to 30 devices. I think I've got 20 some odd different devices here. And when I refresh, it'll be a little longer progress or scrolling bar here. And you see all the different types of devices here, floppy disks, even infrared, modems, serial, parallel, PCM-CIA cards. By the way, does anybody ever know what PCM-CIA stands for? I'm going to guess at this point most of you don't. We just call them PC cards these days, right, because it's so complex. And PCM-CIA stands for People Can't Memorize Complicated Industry Acronyms. And that's why they call them PC cards. It actually stands for Personal Computer Memory Card Industry Association. I'm such a geek. I remember that from yesteryear. But anyways, the reason why we have all these different ports is it's important to be able to lock down different device types. I'm going to give you an example. I wrote a blog a couple years back where it occurred to me that I could take my BlackBerry that has Bluetooth on it, and I could connect to my laptop that had Bluetooth on it. I could establish a data connection. I could copy off a database to my phone. I could delete the Bluetooth connection, and there'd never be a record ever. It's not going over wireless, right? It's not. There's no auditing going on for Bluetooth, data transfers. There's no record anywhere that I ever stole that data. And then I just walk out with my phone, and I've got this data. Better yet example, I happen to have an office on the peripheral of our building, and someone could just drive up in the parking lot. We could be on a phone and saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and try and connect you via Bluetooth, and I tell them what the name of my machine is, and I give them the passcode to get in. I could transfer it to a buddy of mine's phone sitting in the parking lot, and then they could just drive off. So if you're really trying to protect sensitive data from going out, you've got to be proactive in managing every type of device that allows data to go in or out of the environment. So let me go ahead and cancel out of this. There's, of course, Windows firewall settings. Let me talk next about, I never covered power management. So let me go ahead and just really quickly do that. I'm going to jump back to somewhere between desktop configuration and desktop management. And then I'm going to cover doing some remote management, and then I'm going to be finished with my demo here. We have power management built into the product, and there's two aspects of it, managing inactivity and then power schemes. See, the EPA estimates, that the Environmental Protection Agency, they estimate that 58% of the day, your machines are left on doing nothing. They're inactive. You think about all the times that you're in a meeting, you're on the phone, you have to go to the bathroom, you go to lunch, whatever it is. There's an opportunity to maybe turn off the monitor, spin down the hard disks, put the machine in standby mode, whatever the case is. So the power schemes have been there since Windows 98. And so the question, is there to go, well, why am I not doing it? Why am I not doing power management? And the answer there is because there's no real good central way to do it. So we're doing it for you here, allow you to do both power schemes and power plan settings. And the EPA also estimates that only 36% of your machines are shut down at night. That means 64% of your machines are left on. And if you consider like an 8-hour workday, 16 hours a day during the workday, and 24 hours a day on weekends, right? And so what we allow you to do is to monitor for keyboard and mouse inactivity. And if we find that it's inactive, you see here that I can go ahead and I can look for a specific duration of time before I get a warning. And I put a warning display in here. And then I specify down here at the bottom, if I scroll down, the blue area represents the time, the darkened in area, the time that I'm actually watching keyboard and mouse inactivity. And then I can choose to shut down the machine if I want. There's also an ability for users to say, no, please don't do that, skip that, come back a couple times later, or whatever the case is, if you don't want to do it now. So I have this ability to truly manage the power of the machine, so I can both shut it down and I can, of course, wake on land, turn it back on. And then we have, just real quickly, the ability here with custom scripts. I'm not actually going to show this to you, but I have the ability to run what we call pre- and post-engine scripts. That is, the pre-engine, the stuff before the rest of Desktop Authority, configuring everything it's doing, and then post everything afterwards. in case there's something that you want to do that we don't do in our product, you can do it and utilize our validation logic targeting engine. So that way you can focus just on the really cool thing that you know how to do really well and let us handle the targeting for you. So that's actually really nice. The last thing I'm going to show you here is our remote management. I'm going to go ahead and open our remote management web interface here. I'm managing my own desktop here, I refused the request. I'm going to use my NTLM. Why are you refusing my own request? Oh, don't tell me that now. Let me go ahead and log in as me and see if it will let me do this. And if it can't, it's going to be really, really interesting. Let's see here. This is not tied into the other end. Oh, this is a further resurrection. There's a Caselastic. All right, so that's not going to do me any good. All right, so I can't show the remote management client, so I guess I'm just going to have to speak to it. First off, it is deployed out through our configuration management object that's down here. We have our remote management. We can go ahead and deploy it out, and as part of that, you can configure settings like are they going to be notified that someone's taking remote control of their desktop? Do they have to be asked first? Those kind of things. All that's being done here as part of and there's also our remote management deployment. Now, what happens is we run through a standard web browser connection over SSL, of course, so it's 128-bit secure, and what we allow you to do is do both remote management and remote control, and I want to separate the two. And the reason why I want to differentiate between them is because there are some things that you want to do behind the screen that don't require interactive use of the desktop that you can fix. Our remote management client has about 40 different management tasks, one of which is remote control. The other ones are things like editing the disk, doing remote registry lookups, looking at the services, the processes. You can kill processes and services and so on. Do remote command prompt, remotely rebooting the desktop, things that don't require you to be interactive with the user. And then if I need to take remote control of the desktop and be interactive with them, I can then do it. That way the user can remain productive while you're working behind the screen. Hopefully they're doing some work and they're not just playing solitaire or something, right? And they're productive, and then if you need to be interactive, you can do it. So that's kind of a four-part demonstration of desktop authority. Let me go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint slideshow here, where I covered 4 key areas here: desktop configuration, management, security, and support. And remember, the idea here is this proactive desktop management. Don't cram the OS with everything you want 2 years ago. Leave it vanilla, and then let something like desktop authority, in our case, we of course want you to buy our product, do that to actually deploy out every aspect of the desktop so it meets today's needs, meets the current needs of both the business and the user. So there is a full 30-day evaluation of ScriptLogic's desktop authority available online. You see scriptlogic.com/DA. We also have a test drive of the product, which is an online evaluation where you, through a web browser, have access to a VM, a little server and workstation VM pair, and you can utilize desktop authority and configure it, and then log in as the user and see the repercussions of it in case you don't have a demo environment yourself and you don't want to put this in production. So keep that in mind as well. And then, Michael, you want to talk a little bit about more information on your end?
Yeah, here's our contact information. Happy to talk with you at any time. As I mentioned, we do have a strong primary research effort, and so if anybody would ever like to join our panel and be paid for taking surveys and so forth, we'd love to have you join, and you can do that at our website.
So thank you for your time today. Do appreciate it, and we hope you take a look at Desktop Authority. And Michael, thank you for your time today as well. Appreciate your insight, and everyone, thanks a lot.